Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel AI Explorations with Sauradeep. Today is the topic is deep learning, specifically some of the basic deep learning optimization algorithms and the challenges they face due to the inherent complex nature of the loss function in such cases. So without further ado, let me start sharing my screen and get started. So, if you guys follow me in LinkedIn or Medium, you might have seen these couple of blogs. And so I've been reading a lot of papers and trying to understand both the mathematical details and the, say, background where these algorithms were originally conceived and the various insights and intuitions, right? And feel free to check both of these out for a very in-depth breakdown of them. But for today's video, the goal is slightly different. It's like I want to show you the different challenges in deep learning training and motivate you to study these more completed algorithm. Why the vanilla versions like SGD or Newton's method, like the very simple first order and second order methods weren't enough. So let's first go to gradient descent. So one interpretation of it is being greedy with respect to the instantaneous slope. Now, what does that mean? It means suppose you are playing a game, and say I'm like blindfolding you and placing you in a very complex hilly terrain, and if you can manage to somehow go to the lowest point around you, then you win, right? But how would you do that? Because because you can't really see it, so you don't know what's like further ahead of you. You can just feel with your feet what's like the ground beneath you. One strategy could be, so you could try to feel with your feet like which way is the most downhill, like left, right, front, back, and take a step towards that direction. And after you take a step, then again you assess situation and again take another step towards the uh, downhill direction at that point, and you keep going. Now this works perfectly for convex problems. They even have a convergence guarantee that I described like at the initial part of the article. But unfortunately, the loss function is much more complicated for deep learning. We'll talk about the that in a moment. But before that, let's cover SGD. So in the vanilla gradient descent, right, you are supposed to take a step as per the downhill direction, right? But downhill or slope of what? Slope of the loss function. But to calculate the loss function in that algorithm, we pass all the data point through the um, network, right? And then calculate the loss. But imagine you have like 100 million data points. So for every step, you have to compute the results for all the 100 million data points, right? That's very computationally expensive. Instead, what SGD tells you, it tells you, hey, you don't have to, run all the data points before taking a single step. Instead, you just randomly pick one data point and get the loss. And as per SGD, they mathematically prove that yes, it will lead to convergence as long as it's like it's a random data point. So in practice, we don't really do that. What instead we do a compromise or trade-off between the two, the vanilla and SGD. We do a mini batch SGD where we take a random mini batch of say 64 or 128 or 256 data points, right? And run them parallelly in GPU, right? And we get the loss, and then we take a step. So whenever we usually say SGD, these days we just mean mini batch SGD. Now, this SGD, it does simplify, say, some of the challenges. It does simplify the computational expensiveness of original gradient descent, but it faces the same challenges as gradient descent. So let's talk about them. And maybe before that, let's cover another algorithm. which is Newton's method. This was based on first order, right, or derivative. Newton's method is, however, based on the second derivative or Hessian. So before that, let's quickly cover what a Hessian is. Hessian is nothing but this matrix, right? The set of partial derivatives, right? We double second order partial derivatives. And what we do um, in this the Newton's method is this. Firstly, let's cover the intuitions of Newton's method. This comes from the second order Taylor series expansion. So what is Taylor series expansion? Let me jog your memory. So it's like, suppose we know the value of a function at theta naught, right? I want to find the value of the function in another point. Now, how do we do that? Let's try to think intuitively. Suppose the function is a linear function, right? And say I know the value at 4, which is 10. Now, how do I find the value at 6 if I didn't know what type of function it is? I'm like assuming it's linear, but you know, suppose I don't know it. So what can I do? I can just, uh, consider the difference between 4 and 6, which is 2, and then multiply with the slope, right? That way I can calculate. So for if we need, if we just assume the function is linear, whether it is not or not, that's a difference. If we assume it's linear, then we can just take the slope into consideration. But however, what if like it's we want to the function is like quadratic, right? Here, suppose I know the value at 6, but I want to calculate it at 8. Here, if we could take the slope method, but it will give us a underestimate of the value at 8, right? Because the slope is actually increasing at every point. So we'll have to also take the second order derivative in such consideration. And so suppose the actual function is a polynomial of 10th degree, then we'll have to, if we want to really approximate the value of the function in a different point, right? So we know at point 1, but we want to know the value at point 2. We need to take many such degrees. The more degrees we take, the more accurate it is. But here, assuming we're just taking 2 degrees, right, up to second derivative. So this is the equation, the intuition of which we just described, right? So now, for any minima or maxima, as you might recall, the gradient is 0, right? Let's set this to gradient equal to 0, and then we get this solution. That is, from the current weights, let's deduct the inverse of the Hessian, right, into the gradient at theta naught point. So, if it were like quadratic function itself, it's like reaching the minima in one step. But what if it is not? Then we just repeat it multiple times. That basically is Newton's method. Uh, Now, there are some issues with it. Before understanding that, let's first understand eigenvalue, because then only we can understand the shortcomings of this as well as some of the benefits of this Newton's method, right? So eigenvalue is nothing but before covering eigenvalue, let's cover what a typical matrix does, right? So a matrix in general transforms a vector into a different vector. So it could be like project into xy plane. It could be say reflecting like this, and it could be say scaling, rotation, or sort of stretch it. So a matrix can in general do all those things to a vector. Now, uh, coming to the point of eigenvalues, right? So eigenvalues is defined like this. Suppose there is a vector, suppose this is the original vector, right? This is the original vector, and let's call it x vector. Suppose I uh, apply a matrix transformation of A with respect to it. If like, and now what could this do? As we just saw, right, it could do a hell lot of different things here. It could stretch it, it could rotate it, and right. But what if in my case it is just linearly stretched, as in, this one either suppose becomes from x to say 3x. Here this one sort of looks like 3x and this one looks like minus x, right? So what if it's like linearly stretched by a scalar lambda? So in such cases, the x, the vector, is called a eigenvector, and the scaling factor lambda is called a eigenvalue. Now, uh, so for uh, Hessian itself, you might recall Hessian is nothing but these collection of second order derivatives, right? So for Hessian itself, turned out it has certain interesting properties, as in, uh, so turned out for a minima, all the eigenvalues are going to be positive. Sorry, the Hessian is going to be positive definite, which means all the eigenvalues are going to be positive, and opposite for a mm, maxima. And there is also an interesting structure which is quite common in deep learning. We'll see in a moment. It is the saddle point, where, as you can see, you can assume it's like a saddle on top of a horse, and if you look at, like, across its in a direction that is parallel to its backbone of the horse, it's like, it's a minima. And if you go to look at the perpendicular direction to the horse's body, it's like a maxima, right? So that kind of point is a saddle point, and is a very big concern in case of deep learning. Now, what all did we cover? We first covered the Newton's method that takes inverse of Hessian, and then we covered the eigenvalues, and then specifically eigenvalues of Hessian. Why did we cover all this? One reason was to uh, get more insights into Newton's method. Another reason was to inspire you why we need adaptive learning rate. As in, we'll go through some Stanford notes and we'll realize that, uh, mm, why for a vanilla SGD you have to be really picky with the getting the learning rate exactly right. But it's not so for adaptive learning rates. Hope this is all clear. We covered SGD so far, Newton, eigenvalues, and eigenvalues of a Hessian. Now, let's apply all these things to understand various important deep learning papers. So, firstly, before jumping into anything else, maybe let's look at the various deep learning loss functions. So, uh, the loss functions depends on a lot of different things, including the architecture. For example, here, right, in this very awesome paper, right, from, yeah, Neural IPS 2017. So they enlist a lot of different observations about the loss landscape. Firstly, it depends on the architecture. If the, say, they found out ResNet 20, it has relatively smooth, convex, like bowl shape, like almost like that landscape. But as it goes deeper and deeper, right? Say 56, 110. If we remove the skip connection, the short circuit thing, the landscape becomes really the left diagram, like, very highly non-convex, highly chaotic, right? And in the right one, it's more simpler. Just a disclaimer though, this is a simplified visualization, so it's not like it's like so plain and simple. It's just it has less non-convexity, right? So in general, neural networks, as you can see, this does have not just one minima but multiple minima. So we call the other ones as local minima. And you might be thinking that, hey, so in deep learning, the goal must be that, I need to go to the global minima, right? All the local minimas are, uh, by definition, they are worse than global, right? Global minima is like best among all of them. So turned out this paper co-authored by Yann LeCunn in 2014, right? They found something very interesting. Firstly, excuse me. Firstly, they found that, you know mm, mm, how bad these local minima are, that really depends on the um, how deep the network is. For a very deep network, they found out that the local minimas become progressively better and better. So in all practical purposes, in case of deep learning, we don't really need to find a global minima. Locals are good enough. At least some local minima are good. Uh, right. And then they also mentioned that finding a global minima just lead to overfitting itself, right? So one takeaway from here, we're fine with local minima. At least many of them are very good local minima. Now then, what is probably the more pressing issue? So one paper which came out just maybe a few months before this, uh, identifying and attacking saddle points, right? So what they describe is that, again, this one came out before the earlier paper, uh, but the later paper gave more mathematical and theoretical justification. But anyway, so what this firstly tell us that, as the dimensions increase, the local minima, sorry, the saddle points increase exponentially, the ratio of saddle points to local minima. And what is the dimension, by the way? We never talked about it. So in this paper, yeah, the earlier paper by co-authored by Yann LeCunn. So turned out, they realized we can sort of represent the loss function of a neural networks as a polynomial function. And how many degrees is that? Degrees is the number of layers, right? So again, you can imagine, like, it's a very complex polynomial. Cool. Now that we, since complex polynomial and right. Now, this saddle points, how does the two basic algorithms we discuss, SGD and Newton's method, behave in such cases? So, as you can see, let me zoom in further. As you can see, the green one, that is Newton's method, it just goes into the opposite direction in case of saddle points. Uh, And one thing to note, Newton's point does do very well in plateaus. We'll discuss in a moment. Plateaus is like say around local minima, there would be a lot of plateaus where all the gradients are almost zero. It does really well there. But in case of saddle point, Newton does very badly. And the SGD, what does it do? The red one, it does go down, but because the gradients are so low around a saddle point, right? At the saddle point, the gradient itself is zero, right? Because it's a minima from one side and maxima from another side. But even around it, the gradient is pretty low. So it will take very small steps that will slow down the training. So yeah, they proposed a saddle-free Newton method to combat all of that, the blue one. Now let's try to understand uh, why is that. Uh, so right, let's go to, I believe, the explanations are, yeah, yeah, right. Before going here, let's first talk about the Hessian itself once again. So Hessian is a uh, right. Hessian itself. And yeah, so again, for going back to the Newton's method, so we have to invert the Hessian, and we can do so as long as the any of the eigenvalues are not zero. If they are zero, then determinant is zero, so we can't really invert it. And so uh, to handle situations where they are no longer positive definite, as in the eigenvalues are no longer positive, what we do for the saddle free method is that along with the Hessian we add a identity here, as in we add a component of the gradient itself. So this alpha is a hyperparameter, but one thing to note is as alpha becomes higher and higher, it sort of drifts towards the stochastic gradient descent. And another point to note uh, regarding the Hessian itself. So as we mentioned, the Hessian is Hessian is firstly symmetric, and so wait, where is the slide? Just wait a minute. Right. So yeah, it's a symmetric matrix, and if we recall from our linear algebra, it can be expressed in such form, right? Where this delta is the diagonal matrix with eigenvalues as different entries, right? Now, when we invert a Hessian, then we invert this diagonal matrix as well. And if you recall, the uh, inverse of a diagonal matrix, it just its diagonal elements reverse, like 2 becomes 1 by 2, 3 becomes 1 by 3, right? And since in our Newton method we are using a H inverse, so we are actually scaling our step size with a inverse of eigenvalues. That takes us to the point we wanted to cover from this paper, from identifying saddle points, right? Yeah, so it firstly denotes a couple of important things. Firstly is whenever there is a plateau, right? Uh, Almost flat point. So Newton's method can handle that because it's scaling everything by inverse of eigenvalues. However, it's getting stuck in the uh, saddle points. So wait, I wanted to go to a different paper. Maybe I have it written here. Yeah, this is from saddle point paper itself. I couldn't find it, but I have it screenshotted luckily. Right. So because in the Newton's method, firstly, just summarizing, in the Newton's method, we subtract inverse of Hessian into gradient, right? So the in the inverse of Hessian, if we like decompose it, there is a component where there is like diagonal matrix, and we invert it, so it becomes inverse you can say inverse of all the eigenvalues. So we are scaling the step size by inverse of eigenvalues, right? So as a result, we can speed up in case of plateaus as well. However, that's not the case for SGD. SGD, if you recall, let's go back to the blog itself. Mm, Yeah, SGD, this is like a learning rate into the gradient. So if the gradient is very low, right, as in a plateau, it will take very small steps. And this is the reason why even in the saddle point, around the saddle point, right, we are taking very, very small steps. So this is a issue, like gradient descent slowing down around plateaus, but Newton's method, it doesn't have it. But then there are other issues in Newton's method. We just covered saddle point, but there is a there is a way to handle it. As we were talking, um, where is that? Yeah. So we're adding this I, right? Okay. I think I didn't explain why adding this I will make it more positive definite. So this is just again plain linear algebra, and comes from the definition of eigenvalues itself. How do we calculate eigenvalues, right? We're talking ax equal to lambda x. So determinant of a of lambda I equal to 0. Now, if we add a diagonal matrix to the original matrix, right, it becomes a plus ci minus lambda I. As a result, the eigenvalues are like, if eigenvalues are right, greater now. So that way, by adding this identity to the Newton's method, does help you know mm, Newton's method work even in case of saddle points, as long as the negative eigenvalues are not too high, right? So yeah, there are and apart from this, the another probably very big disadvantage with Newton's method is it's a second order method. It's take a lot of computation. There are alternatives like conjugate gradients and all, but they are still not as you can say computationally simple as gradient descent itself. Now, uh, so we need to figure out a way to handle these plateau conditions for stochastic gradient descent, right? And another motivation for momentum. Let me go to Bishop's book. Where is Bishop? So there is uh, Bishop, as well as in this book as well. There is a very good illustration, probably a few pages earlier. Yeah. So mm, in cases like this, right? Such kind of ill conditions surfaces, gradient descent might not be the best way. And why is that? That's why am I not going to the, yeah, yeah. So gradient descent, we are taking a step along the steepest descent, right? So for example, this is a label set diagram. So the steepest descent would be perpendicular to the surface at any point. So as you can see here, the perpendicular is this way. I'm going down and again going perpendicular, again going perpendicular. So whenever there is such sort of, you can say, valley, the gradient doesn't really point towards the minima. So there's like a lot of oscillation. That's why comes the concept of our, you can say, third algorithm we are talking about, which is momentum. So in momentum, right, what do we do? Earlier we were like saying ki, hey, matlab, we just our eyes are closed. We just take the instantaneous slope, right? Here we're like, hey, let's track the history as well. And as in, say if we are going, it's like the momentum in physics, right? If we are going left for a while, and then suddenly in our current step the slope is like 0, um, but still let's keep going. So we do this by mathematically do this by exponential moving average, as in, let's have the say zero point 0.9 of the earlier direction and the zero point 0.1 of the new direction, right? New slope. So let's just, exponential moving average that kinds. And intuitively it's like, I'm moving like running very fast, and or say cycling, biking very fast. Even if I stop pedaling, I'll just keep going for a while. So what does this do? Firstly, whenever we have a say loss function like this, which is what they call a poor conditioning, right? Which means like it's like elliptical kind of thing, uh, right? And this is again a label set. Each of the points on these lines, they are at the same level of loss function. So this poor conditioning, it helps in such narrow you can say valleys. And the second thing is stochastic gradient descent, right? Remember, we're not looking at the entire data set, we're just randomly taking a mini batch. That variance as well, it sort of helps in combating that. So this is our first important algorithm, momentum. And then let's cover a very related algorithm, or rather algorithm that can be interpreted that way. So Nesterov in 1983, for in the field of convex optimization itself, he came up with one algorithm where specifically for case of smooth convex function. Now, without going into the definition, you can just smooth means what you think. Like rather than having very sort of pointy kind of thing, it's like very uh, circular kind of thing, circular or non-pointy, right? That's Let's stick with that for now for smoothness. But anyway, he combined the properties of smoothness and convexity to come up with this algo. But Hinton and Sutskever, who is like Sutskever is the chief scientist at OpenAI right now, they realized this Nesterov algorithm can be interpreted as a form of momentum. So, as in, momentum, what we are doing, we were adding the current, uh, gradient, right, to the older estimates with some weight. Say older one say has zero point 0.9 importance, current one say has zero point 0.1, right? We're like doing a moving average of the gradients. But what Nesterov can be reinterpreted as is that, suppose whatever my old direction was, right, I hypothetically take a step there and then check the slope, right? And that slope I add to my moving average. Now, what does that do? They explained it this way, is that it provides a more timely correction in case the VT, the earlier step, was bad. And in fact, the experiments does show it. For example, here they compare a highly, you can say, high curvature direction, and this is the green is the momentum, and blue is the Nesterov accelerated gradient, or NAG. So as you can see, there is a lot of more oscillation in the momentum as compared to the NAG. So there are like different versions of NAG added to other algorithms, like other adaptive learning algorithms, and in general, it performs better than momentum being added to those algorithms. Now, we're now coming to the last topic, as in uh, motivating you, like why do we need adaptive learning rate, right? These algorithms, we'll not discuss them today, but one thing is common. They require or at least they try to get a different learning rate, the different optimal learning rate in each direction. So in fact, the if we look at the ADA Delta paper, which is like came out after ADA grade and almost same time as RMS prop, right? Say when they talk about the benefits of the method, one thing is really comes out is that they are like saying, hey, the for plain SGD, there's like so much learning rate tuning that goes on, trying to figure out the best one. But we just, when we use this method, we don't need to tune much, and we are like getting equally good results. So uh, let's now try to understand this mathematically. I mean, just mathematical intuition, that why for the SGD itself we need like this perfect tuning of learning rate. Why is that? Now, I believe it's like halfway somewhere. Yeah. So firstly, uh, here they assume the loss surface is convex quadratic, and we will generalize this to a general function in a moment, right? But let's assume it is. And now this is the gradient descent update, and we're like solving the iterations, like how does theta k compare with the theta naught. Did I go? Yeah. And let's do a spectral decomposition of A. And what is A? A is the matrix that was defining the objective function. Objective function, say in our case, is like loss function. And right now, for the sake of simplicity, we're assuming quadratic loss function. So anyway, it's a symmetric matrix. So we do a spectral decomposition, right? And we see that and spectral decomposition we covered just a time some time back. So this Q, right? Q is the matrix of eigenvectors. Remember eigenvectors? Just a quick revision. If my vector x, right, when I apply matrix A, it's scaled by a scalar lambda, right? Then for the matrix A, x is the eigenvector and x lambda is the eigenvalue. As in, when we apply the matrix transformation, it just stretches in either direction. It doesn't rotate, or it doesn't reflect or whatever. It just uh, either linearly goes in the same direction or the opposite direction. So that was the concept of eigenvalues and vector. Now going back, right? This Q is the matrix of eigenvectors, and this delta is like the a diagonal matrix with each element as the eigenvalues. Now, uh, uh, we had just expressed using the gradient descent formula. We had just expressed uh, theta k in terms of theta naught. So we can see that, like each coordinate gets multiplied by 1 minus uh, sorry 1 minus this, let me remove this, yeah, 1 minus alpha, and then lambda I, where lambda is the one of the eigen values of A. Now, so uh, just suppose, right, suppose 1 minus um, alpha lambda. Let's consider different cases. So if it's like negative, right? So it's like and when will it be negative? So say when this value is higher than 1. So then it would be like say minus 1 to the power k, right? If k is odd, then it's positive. If k is sorry, minus 1 to the power k, if k is odd, it's like minus 1. If k is even, it's k, right? So that's why if for if it's like say a negative quantity, there would be oscillation. And if it's like say greater than 2, right, then it's like it's a again the signs are reversing, but the magnitude is just keeps going on increasing and increasing. So suppose let me maybe make it more clear. So there is a quantity 1 minus alpha, which is alpha is again learning rate, right? We were earlier saying how is eigenvalues important for in case of SGD. So this is how. So 1 minus alpha into lambda, right? So this is a let's maybe simplify it for our sake. AL, let's call it, right? So if the value is positive, right? Say the value of this is 0.8, suppose, right? Let's see, and we're multiplying the entire thing. What is the formula here? the theta k, going to the previous page. Wait. Yeah, theta k is theta naught into this part to the power k. Let's try to get that. I probably should have done this, prepared this Excel earlier, but that's fine. Um, K equal to 2, 1, 2, 10, and 50, right? Let's suppose, let's insert, yeah, let's suppose this value is 0.8, that would be one case. I should probably zoom in a bit for someone who is watching this from the phone. Is it zooming out? Okay, let's go ahead. And suppose it's like the entire quantity, right? 1 minus AL. Suppose it's a small value, 0.2, and suppose it's a big negative value like minus 1.2. Now, when would it happen? Let's insert a cell here, right? Maybe a couple of cells. Yeah, suppose alpha into lambda, right? Suppose AL is equal to 0.2, right? Then the entire quantity becomes 1 minus 0.2 and we get a 0.8. Now what is 0.8 to the power square? I actually don't know the Excel formula for power. Let me just check that. Excel formula for power exponential. So this is the last topic, last concept, but I just wanted to show you uh, power of x, power 10 of 2. Okay, cool. Mm, so assume the learning rate into lambda is 0.2, then the entire thing becomes 0.08, right? And when you did get minus 0.2, suppose AL equal to alpha lambda equal to 1.2, then the entire thing becomes minus 0.2, right? I hope you are following. So this, why are we doing this again? We are just trying to see how does the selection of alpha become really important. So alpha, the learning rate, and how does it depend on the eigenvalues? And again, eigenvalues, as you might recall, eigenvalues of Hessian, they sort of talk about a curvature. So there would be some directions with higher curvature, some with lower curvatures. So when you do you get minus 1.2, it would be if it's like 2.2, right? Alpha lambda equal to 2.2. Then this is minus 1.2. So we covered three cases that the Stanford lecture had mentioned. So what was that formula? Power or something. Power, yeah. Power, uh, this to the power 10, right? Okay. And let's copy this. Now iteration 50. And again, we are again comparing. What are we comparing? Say the theta naught, the original weights, along with the weights after k iterations. K's value are 2, 10, and 50. Anyway, so right. Okay, we are supposed to actually check the divergence. So we have to take adjacent cells to see how the sign flips. So let's do this. This is 51st iteration. This is 52nd iteration. Let's check these. Right. Uh, so as you can see, for cases where alpha lambda, right, it's less than 1, then it's like, the sign doesn't change, it's sort of converging. And when it's like between 1 to 2, the signs are flipping, but there's no divergence. It's not like, going sideways. But if it's like more than 2, it's totally divergent. Like signs are flipping and the values are like, extremely huge. So that's what they meant here. So these use cases, right? If it's more than 2, it's like unstable. It's like diverging. Every iteration just going this way, extremely this way or extremely the other way. That's why, right? We need to stick to the first case, which is alpha is less than 1 by lambda max. Why lambda max? Because this is for one lambda I for a given direction. But again, as you have seen, right, there could be uh, very complicated pathological surfaces in case of deep learning. So we have to be prepared for all the directions, right? Otherwise, there will be divergence. So the learning rate alpha needs to be lower than this 2 by lambda max. As a result, what would happen? If I mean, unless it's less than this, the learning would just diverge. So we have to make sure it's lower than that, and we can if we keep it too low. However, the learning would just simply slow down. Hence, hence the need of a adaptive learning rate. That's why we need all these ada grad, ada delta, right? Somehow to regulate the learning rate in different directions. Like, say in case of Adam and stuff, when we'd maybe go through those videos later on, we'll see, yeah, there is a global learning rate, but it's like we optimally tune it for each directions. That's it for today. I hope this gave you enough intuitions to think about to motivate you, right? Why we needed momentum, right? The historical gradient, and why we needed the adaptive learning rate. And rather than just telling you some just telling you with words, I thought, why not just show you the maths? Because as I think Galileo said, math is the language in which God created the universe. So I hope this gave a good idea about all that. And stay tuned for other in-depth discussions on AI ML field. Bye for today.